all, and I hope you enjoyed the past evening, and I hope that you are full of energy and already excited to hear the next presentations. So we'll start with Viola Weissenhofer, who is a researcher at Charles University Institute of Social and Sociological Studies, and she will present super exciting material on pagan revival and how they cope with the pandemic restrictions. Viola, please.
Thank you. To find how to manage this. So I just press on the
arrows work.
Okay. So today I will be speaking about an ongoing research, an ethnographic research, a big part of which focuses on the identity processes at work in contemporary pagan revival in Hungary. And from this material, I will give you a hopefully useful case of public events in Corona times when restrictions were not necessarily respected. So I will try to provide both you with material on both public and private rituals, and I will also try to take into account the effect of the evolution of the restrictions on the given practices, because the restrictions changed from one wave of the pandemic to the other, or the relationship to the rules. So as a tentative argument, which I will not overdevelop, so it could be also a joint reflection, but in any case, the point I would like to make is that these restrictions, or this relationship to the restrictions, the way people acted in rituals during these restrictions, but also their circumvention may contribute to the ritual efficacy in these events, which is here related both to spiritual experiences and a sense of national belonging. So, first of all, I would like to give some general elements on neo-paganism in Hungary, which will allow to briefly justify my interest in these spiritual experiences and this sense of national belonging. And I would also like to say something on, so to schematically locate neo-paganism in Hungarian society. It's not
working. You will start working.
So I just pressed it. Listening to the wrong. Okay. So, in Hungary, neo-paganism is a protean movement that has evolved since the 1990s through the activities of autodidact and non-mainstream historiographers. You can see some of their books on the slide. Historical reenactment groups and practitioners of local forms of neo-shamanism. So individuals and groups are inspired by romantic nationalism and ethnogenetic theories that take us back to the 10th century when the nomadic Magyar Hungarian tribes arrived in the Carpathian Basin. There you can see a romantic painting depicting that moment. So these theories suppose that present-day Hungarians descend directly from the Huns and Attila and from the Scythes. The idea of continuity between these peoples is also widespread among Hungarians who hold nationalist ideals. So, ideologically, neo-paganism is here closely connected to the progressive rise of nationalism in the past decades. So the question is how, the question to know how neo-pagans relate to the political right wing is another question, but we can discuss that later. In any case, whether these are neo-pagans holding them or nationalists in general, this conception of history is a means of crediting Hungarians with a glorious past, which many persons engaged in pagan revival feel lacking from academic historiography. So science And among sciences, mostly history and other humanities, such as linguistics, folklore, and archaeology. So science is another social field with which Hungarian neo-paganism in general has an ambiguous relationship with. At the same time, most pagans I have met are rather spiritual but not religious, have a strong interest for alternative healing techniques, folk traditions, not only local, but from other areas as well, and lifestyles they deem traditional. And many of them are or were engaged in other practices that may qualify as spiritual, alternative, or new age, such as radiesthesia and naturopathy for some, or Buddhism and meditation, or even Krishna consciousness for others. So neo-paganism is also connected to the wider field of contemporary spiritualities. As to their practices, persons engaged in inventing or recreating pre-Christian Magyar beliefs and practices creatively adapt archaeological, historiographic, and folkloric sources, and they craft new rituals, public and private, and gatherings that allow them to act in the spirit of the nomad ancestors they claim to descend from. But this is not a homogeneous movement, and there is no agreed way of presentifying the past. To my previous fieldwork, I worked with these two emblematic pagan circles from Budapest, which represent two ways of living the past or presentifying the past. I will talk about the people on the left mostly. But just to say it very briefly, so on the left we have a shamanic circle, which draws very, very heavily on horse shamanism and urban shamanism. The other one that I call intellectual circle represents something that may be called esoteric nationalism or nationalist esotericism, but their activities are mostly based on texts, readings and public lectures, and trips also, but that's another question. And in the shamanic circle, ritual life is somehow more active and more intense than in the intellectual circle. But what makes a common point between these two groups is that both rely on the figure of the Tárdos, who is the local specialist of the local religious specialist, who is supposed to be a shaman. But there are lots of discussions concerning this, if it's real, or if it really has historic antecedents or not. As I said, in the shamanic circle, this is related to neo-shamanism. In the intellectual circle, it's a different mediation. It's more historical figures, mainly kings that are endowed with the capacities, the qualities of the Tárdos, of this local shaman. So this is a common point. Of course, they don't agree between each other, but that's another question again. To these modalities of representing the past, we might add one of this pagan revival's most conspicuous expressions, which is the festival of Purultáj. Actually, it's a biannual festival, so there's a big version of it every even year. No. Yes, every even year, and every odd year there's a smaller one, Ancestors' Day, which happened this year, so we have fresh pictures. And so this is very emblematic because it brings together many different participants of this universe, but not only persons engaged in shamanism or new shamanism, but also scientists, who subscribe to these particular versions of history, craftsmen, musicians. So it's a very wide festival. And the interesting thing about the Purultáj, so the big version of this festival, is that it brings together Hungarians with their purported ancestors from Central Asia. So the Kazakhs and so on and so forth. But last year it was cancelled, so I will get back to that. This is emblematic once more, just to sum up this part, because it somehow gathers all of the actors, and it's very, very dense. Now, where am I? Now you see where I conduct my research, and a few words now, what I'm interested in really nowadays. I'm trying to look at how rituals in this context elicit not only experiences of being spiritual, which we can discuss later on what I mean by that, but for now I will say that it is a particular way of relating to people and things. It's a way of learning how to recognize one's own and others' latent spiritual qualities and the capacity of revealing these. So this sounds a little bit complicated, but I hope it will become a little bit more clearer. And in this case, these rituals also elicit the experience of being an exemplary Hungarian. So there is a spiritualized sense of national belonging, and this is what I'm trying to understand how it is constructed. So today, the question is how this was possible with all the restrictions in place during the different waves of the pandemic. So before I get to that, I will explain myself, because for ethnographic reasons, I will speak about the shamanic group. Why? It's because in the intellectual circle, this coping with the restrictions was quite straightforward. So as they hold public lectures, these are always filmed, and anybody can request a DVD, so this was quite accessible. Nothing much was going on except for what they were doing before, but the other ethnographic reason is that for the last 6 months or more, I have followed this shamanic leader more closely because I finally have enrolled in his shamanic school to get to know his practices better and to try to be a part of practitioners. Here we are. Let me introduce you to Zoltán Sólyom-Finagyi, who is a very renowned shaman. Everybody calls him Sólyom, hawk, according to his power animal's name. And he's a very central figure in pagan revival. So he runs this shamanic school I mentioned already since 1997, in his home near Budapest now. And he also organizes regular sweat lodge ceremonies. Every year at the summer solstice, he organizes the Hungarian Sundance, which takes a whole week. And he also organizes an international shamanic festival called Sandir. And he also developed a healing technique of his own. And let me mention, among his many activities is that he is now a student in anthropology at the University of Pécs, and Judith is his advisor in the master's. So the world is really, really small.
They're our biggest relationship. Sorry? They're our biggest relationship.
Yes, yes. And of course, Sólyom is also involved in the Kurultai festival. But before we get to the Kurultai, let's take a look of what happened last year after the outbreak of the pandemic and during the first lockdown. So all Tájos activities went online. These consisted mainly in a very central core shamanism activity, which is a drumming circle. So people get together, sing and drum together. There might be some shamanic journeying involved, but it's not that current. They held their drumming circles online, or occasionally giving teachings, but in any case, providing their followers with encouraging messages in this difficult situation. And All of them seemed really aware of the gravity of the situation and of the dangers involved, although the first wave of the pandemic did not hit Hungary very, very strongly. The second and the third were worse. So a few words now about the Kurultai. So on the left you can see how it was. These are 2018 pictures, and now a picture from last year. Well, the Kurultai was cancelled, but only 2 weeks before it took place. It was supposed to take place in August. It was just cancelled before the beginning of the third wave. And this was, as you can imagine, very tragic for all of those who were planning to attend, not only because for the reenactment groups and other participants, it takes a lot of time and energy to get prepared, let's also mention all the delegates from Central Asia, so it's a huge organization. So these are technical things, but Hungarian participants, they really have a sense of responsibility in taking part in this event. So they have a sense of responsibility in perpetuating this tradition, however invented it may be. So the organizers of the Kurultai do not define it as a festival, but as a tribal gathering and a commemoration. Accordingly, the atmosphere is not intended to be festive, no confetti involved, but rather solemn, and visitors are also asked to have a dignified behavior and to refrain from excessive alcohol consumption, to dress properly, to have their shoulders covered, and to avoid any kind of loud behavior. While the festival is not declaredly religious or spiritual in their discourses, in several instances it encourages participants to adopt attitudes of reverence and or of contemplation. This gravity or solemnity came to the fore when the Kurultai was finally celebrated despite the restrictions in a very condensed way. Selected persons gathered with the pagan leaders, Shoyo included, you can see him somewhere on the right. So they gathered to perform the fire ritual that usually closes the big Kurultai event. It was one of the titles that hosted this event at his property near the place where the Kurultai is organized. This form, or this frame they found to replace the original Kurultai suggests that the lighting of a ritual fire is a minimal form of Kurultai. An important element is that the event was not announced on social media to avoid massive attendance, but it was filmed and made available on the festival's website and also broadcasted on Kazakh television as a message to the Kazakh brothers. A very touching speech was made by the organizer of the Kurultai, who is an anthropologist from the Natural History Museum of Budapest, who is specialized in the genetic heritage of 19th century Hungarians. I will just summarize the message he passed on. He explained the purpose of the lighting of this fire, while the picture is not, it doesn't show it really well, but he explained that they were burning the tree of life used at the previous Kurultai, because this piece of wood, a carved piece of wood, which is very big, you can see one of those. They always change them on the top left picture. So it was damaged, so it was doomed to decay, as he explained. This ritual was intended to send it up to the sky, to the ancestors, and he also explained the importance of this object, which is, I quote, which served formerly as a spiritual unifying force or a connecting power and a vector of energies. this was this restricted Kurutai, and to the wider public that did not know that this was taking place, a short documentary was broadcasted on the cultural channel of national television, because I think I didn't mention yet, but the Kurutai usually has thousands of visitors from all over the country, not only from the current Hungary, but of course from the north, from the south of Slovakia, from the north of Serbia, from all over the Hungarian-speaking territories. So this was the second wave. This was the beginning of the third wave. But interestingly, from October to February, which is the duration where the third wave hit really, really hard, I did not register any online activities such as drumming circles from part of the Tájtos. And all I know is that in the case of Solyomfi, it meant that he resumed pretty much his activities. With fewer people. I don't have statistics on that, but he was not as respectful of the restrictions as he was during the first wave. He told me a few months ago that going to his place, to his shamanic school, depends on each one's individual decision. Those who feel safe to go, they can go without any restrictions. So this was the case in March this year when I enrolled in his shamanic school. So this occasion, which I lived, was not strictly speaking a public festivity as the Kurutai can be, but rather a private ritualized teaching as his school is conceived. But in my view, what happened there, the way people related to each other there, it allows us to get closer to this particular texture of human relationships that are established in the course of these practices, and so the whole relational dynamics that characterize this universe of practices, which I have to mention just briefly that people who go there are completely strangers to each other, and they get to know each other on this occasion, and they really behave very intimately. So it's a sort of not a paradox, but an interesting tension in these practices. The teachings started in April. And this was the first occasion of this shamanic school, which consists in 12 steps, if you like. But on the first occasion, everybody had the choice to attend online. However, 15 persons over 22 were on site. Everybody was authorized to attend online because these were theoretical teachings. The first one is an introduction, cosmological teachings, and so on and so forth. For the second step of the teachings, which took part mid-May, we were invited to attend in person, but there was some kind of a problem of communication because we received an email saying that not a problem of communication, it was communicated like that. In this email, telling us what to bring and all the timeline of the weekend. And it said that all safety measures, all sanitary measures would be respected. And of course there were masks in the room that anybody could take, and hand sanitizer, but nobody used anything. On the contrary, and this is maybe an important detail, that this is the time when the vaccination campaign was really had been launched off, and more people got vaccinated. But nobody was sure if the other people were vaccinated, so no precautions were taken. So, for example, people who had participated in person at the last occasion, they greeted each other with warm hugs, which was also the case in the Kurutai, the small Kurutai. So no social distancing whatsoever. And the new persons who arrived as me, I was also greeted with warm hugs, but no problem until then. Another interesting element was that nobody really took the initiative to talk about this, the restrictive measures or the vaccination. So it was really tacit, this whole thing. No public announcement was made of how we should behave. Well, you can see the room. We were 20 or so, plus Shoyum and 2 other people who arrived later. So we were really squeezed in. And of course, those who slept there, they had to share the same room, and so on and so forth. I have to say that there's no declared anti-vax position or pro-vax position. Everybody is free to think what they wish to get vaccinated or not. There is no central directive. What happened in this place is that we did exercises which required considerable physical proximity, like rebirthing. You basically squeeze yourself through a tunnel made out of people. So no way to do some social distancing. But this was still okay for me because the whole thing was getting more and more intense. On Sunday, we received the visit of one of Shoyum's friends and colleagues, sort of a shaman himself, who comes to Hungary regularly, who is German, and who travels around Europe, being a gypsy and searching for his gypsy roots and establishing, learning from local gypsy people. So that's Andreas, who came on Sunday. And he gave us some teachings in the afternoon, and then he proposed a practical exercise, which consisted in the following. I don't know if I have the time, but if somebody wants to join me in this risky exercise, I don't know. I would.
It's all that we allow you to
Yeah. No, I won't do it. But so we were standing really close to one another. And this was a breathing exercise that aimed hyperventilation to encourage altered states of consciousness and shamanic journey. Because this was the object of the whole purpose of this weekend, was to learn how to meet our power animal and how to learn shamanic journey. So we were like this. We had to do like this and go first and faster and faster. So the feeling that this produced, I had breaths all over my body, and I was there, this is not what I saw on TV or heard on the radio. This is not how we're supposed to behave. I had just been vaccinated the week before. So I was not at all nice. So, okay, let's do this, but let's try not to breathe. I think I was the only person in the room for whom this was a problem. So there I was faced with a choice of perhaps running out or just saying, let's stop this because this is not right. But no, I continued. And this is what triggered this reflection about the relationships between these persons in these practices. Because as I mentioned, they are complete strangers to each other, but in the course of these practices, there's lots of sharing going on. Lots of people tell the story of their lives or the current problems they might be encountering in their relationships. So it's basically like a psychotherapeutic relationship between people. And despite this strangerness, people really feel close to each other. And in my view, without overthinking this or but of course some more analysis would be required. But I think this trust everybody experienced or acted on is telling of this kind of particular relationship between people in this context. So I think this is my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Then we have a next super exciting presentation by Martin Pecha, one of the organizers. Please, Martin, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much. Tak podaję 30 sekund. Okay, so dancing to the sound of disco bit, pandemic invitations of One Prague Carnival. If you happened to be on the streets of Prague on November 17, 2020, around 5 p.m., you might have met this group of approximately 25 masked individuals around a huge walking model of a disco ball, distinctly dressed up or posing as a COVID virus. And if you were interested in who they were, you might have requested a leaflet, which started with the following revelatory statement. The globe descended onto the earth, twilight, so this COVID lives in multitudes, and taking advantage of the twilight shines. The book of disco changes, chapter 36. The situation is, of course, quite clear to those of you who are well versed in I Ching, or the book of changes, a traditional Chinese text, to which this text alludes. This is clearly indicated by the inclusion of the 36 trigram, which you see at the bottom of the slide, which is a combination of Chinese symbols meaning darkening of light, or brilliance injured, or intelligence hidden. I'm not a sinologist, so that's Wikipedia talking here. For us perplexed and ignorant others, the leaflet included further explication under the headline, Towards New Mutations. That's the check, this is part of the leaflet, and it said, the disco bit mutates, sweeps with world, permeates across classes, nations, and species. Political systems, our habits, technologies, superheroes, and ordinary mortals mutate with it. Disco bit teaches that mutations, transformations, and hybrid forms are and always have been all around us. The whole world is, in fact, a product of that. 10,000 things change while man tries to create an illusion of normality and immutability. It goes on. To walk in the parade, to meet the new mutations, is to accept this reality and the will to change. We mutated this year too, like Ninja Turtles, crawling into the sewers, eating pizza, and devising a plan to get the satirical parade of masks into the streets, even in this situation. We learned tactics from this COVID himself, obviously it's a male, or our action is not meant to be a protest against sanitary measures. On the contrary, we take them very seriously. After all, we were wearing masks before it was cool. Now, so this is what you would have learned, right? So what were the onlookers actually watching? They were watching the very, very limited edition of the 2020 so-called Velvet Carnival. Before we sort of look into the disco bit further, I want to first shortly present what the Velvet Carnival actually is, so we can compare what changed with the 2020 edition. Right, so the Velvet Carnival, and this is the 2020, is a procession of city groups and NGOs of approximately 120 to 400 participants, varying each year. Since 2012, these groups march on November 17 through the center of Prague. They do so on the occasion of the celebration of the fall of communism in 1989. And the crucial element of the whole event is that the organizers, who work closely with the individual groups, strive to transpose the depicted topics to a satirical level, and we can discuss if this is satire or not, we'll see. In the weeks leading up to procession itself, the participants, which are NGOs, civic groups, high school students, even elementary school students, transform the selected pressing social issues into masks, and these float and march through the Prague. To provide a complete context, I'm going to be speaking from a position I co-founded with Olga in 2012. So I'm sort of split in an insider-outsider position. So sometimes I will talk about them, and sometimes I might slip into we. So don't be surprised. Right? It's a difficult situation to sort of negotiate the positions. All right. So they. If they actually manage to transpose it into a satirical level. It's yes, here, this is my favorite picture, it's from 2016. The nun is not a costume, I mean, the nun sort of happens to be around. And this is my favorite picture, it's so, and this is just a taste of the other years and of the other examples of the other groups. Okay. I will give you a short Velvet Carnival and its cultural context expose. November 17, the Czech Republic is officially designated as the Struggle for Freedom and Democracy Day since 2000. It's a national holiday, and it commemorates events of 2 days, November 17, 1939, when the Nazis closed Czech universities, executed 9 students and professors without trial, and sent 1,200 others to concentration camps, many of them died there. The second day being commemorated is 17 November 1989. In fact, the 2 dates are connected. The 1989 protests were related to the commemoration of the 1939 events. After the Berlin Wall had fallen, students gathered to commemorate the 39 events. This gathering turned demonstration was met by force by the state police. You can see the situation. It initiated a series of events which gradually toppled the communist regime in former Czechoslovakia. The two countries split in '91, so that's why it's just Czechia now. The transition went relatively smoothly and without loss of life, so therefore it's named Velvet Carnival, sort of soothes your face, I guess. It's a highly symbolical date. Present democratic Czech society derives its birth from that moment, right? That's the moment of rebirth of democracy. It annually turns to it to re-energize its ideals. And it's bizarre, it's so important that even the Communist Party found a way how to co-celebrate these events. So they don't actually refer to the 1989 events, of course not, but to the 1939 and the fight against fascism. So, but everyone celebrates, even the communists do. So that's very effective from a ritual point of view. It also marks the moment or the ability of ordinary citizens to sort of critique and stand up to political power and authority. Also, many people who took part in the protests recollect what Victor Turner called, right, so we have politicians right here playing rats, We have people presenting candles. There's actually a monument, a small plaque dedicated to this event where the most brutal assault happened. It's 150 meters from here. We can go after lunch to see it. It's also an occasion of protests, very often massive, thousands of people protests, and of course it's a remembrance day. So many people during that day experienced what Victor Turner called communitas. It was a very euphoric time in 1989. We were young, and I was a young filmmaker. People were throwing off their fear. There was this amazing feeling of freedom. Of course, we realized it would not be forever. They actually reflect, this is for the New York Times from 2014, and in an interview. So it has a great symbolic resonances. It is not comparable. It is a national foundation myth, and contains many dynamics typical for civil religion. James Krapfel even talks about the sacralization of a revolutionary community. So if you look at the dynamics in 1899 and in the way how it is celebrated right now, overall, outside of the carnival, it has these dynamics. These quasi-religious aspects are obvious in the Velvet Sanctuary, which I talked about. So this is it's not called like that. This is the original place where the people had to go through two lines of policemen and beat them, and they had to go through this underpass. So the people were sort of closed in, and hundreds of people were beaten very badly. And it's this niche, this place, started immediately to become sacralized in a way. We see President Clinton and Havel here doing the sign. This is the monument itself, and people present candles. Right now it's actually outside on the street because the company that owns the building made a meeting room out of that. So it's actually on the outside of the building right now. I can't talk about that now. Fine. Okay, who are the groups who take part in the Velvet Carnival? This was the context. They're called cliques or cliques after the French version. So the majority of the groups are NGOs, and they're paired with elementary or high school students, and very often also with the client base with whom the pandemic, with whom the NGO actually interacts. So we can homeless people, ex-convicts, the target groups. There's a great positive side to working with the NGOs. They are highly motivated, unless they're completely burned out, of course. They have a specific agenda that you can point to, and other members of the cliques include artists, musicians, a dramaturgist, and a certain what we call godmother or godfather, which is a dramaturgist on coke. Essentially a senior dramaturgist who is capable of managing not only two parties but many, right? If the groups are large, to sort of, and I will explain what they do together, and that has to be a very skilled person who is capable of mediating amongst all of these individual actors. Right, so we have the civic groups, NGOs, schools and clients, an artist, a dramaturgist, godmother or godfather, musicians, that's our term. Their term. Organizers' term. Fine. The organizers require that all groups firmly follow three rules. The first one is it has to be satirical. How the groups reach, how do you satirically depict domestic violence, right? How do you satirically depict people dying of COVID? So it's a very difficult task, but that is the main part of the activities which actually precede the procession itself. Participants must wear masks, which are ideally covering the whole head, and written text with a conventional semantic purpose, content-oriented, save the whales, I don't know, less hate or love. So these things are not allowed there. You can't say that, right? So
You can say more hate, less love.
yes, if you say more hate, less love, then that sort of goes against that's allowed. That would be allowed because that sort of goes against the expectation. The only thing that you can, like the written word is allowed, but it's on the fringes of the group, and it has also to have a satirical form. So these pamphlets are handed out, what I read at the beginning with the coronavirus, that was part of the pamphlet. And these are some of the examples. Now, if you look at the group in 2020, it more or less looks exactly like any other year. Okay, there were 25 people, not 350, so it was much smaller. But otherwise, as an onlooker, you would not notice any difference, right? It took place, the group was in the newspapers approximately in the same way as every year. Because they had this huge COVID disco ball, they were actually even on the front pages because it was sexy to photograph. So from that point of view, Velvet Carnival took place, but my question is, did it take place? Now, I apologize for the iceberg cliche thing I'm doing right now, right? But it actually is a very precise description of what happened. So, the procession itself is the tip of the iceberg. That's what everyone sees. Everyone sees a coordinated group. No one has an idea that, thank you, that's my certification of vaccination. Yes. No one actually sees that the group is a heterogeneous group of different, completely, of people from different backgrounds. And that was what was visible in 2020, but underneath there is a series of events taking place which is leading up to the procession itself. There are lectures. Very often it's, as throughout the years, we, now I'm talking as the organizer, developed a lecture, also in cooperation with the colleague from one of our colleagues at the university, where we explain how satire differs from caricature. Right? And again, we can discuss that, but it does. Let's say, if we simplify, caricature is a black and white finger pointing to a group which you want to laugh at or remember the big noses in newspapers. Satire, on the other hand, should be reflexive. So you can make fun of people, of course, satire does that, but essentially there should be an element that brings this finger pointing back at you, and there's a reason why you're laughing at somebody, right? So there should be this reflection back. And this has to be explained, because it's not at all a self-evident thing. So we sort of talk about that. We get together with the people and we talk about the role of satire in society and democracy. Intergroup discussions. That happens with the dramaturgist and the artist. The groups get together, they think about the topic which they want to depict, and then they brainstorm ideas. The artist draws sketches. Then we sort of do a get-together. Oh, but even before that, the artist has to be paired with the group, right? It's a very intimate cooperation, and they have to sort of fit together. So the artists present their art to people who very often haven't heard anything about art whatsoever. They show how they're dressing lemons as oranges, and like everyone's looking at it like. And so you have this group, and they discuss the topics. Then the topics are brought together, and the groups present the topics to each other and discuss whether it works or not. So there's this first level of reflection, whether the topic actually works or not. Those are the intergroup idea exchange workshops, and then there are the mass working workshops, where all the groups meet again, people actually do things together, they start talking together, and relationships are developed. So this is the majority, this is what Velvet Carnival does. And of course, what you can imagine what happened during this didn't happen at all, right? So the procession still happened, but it was primarily organized and conducted. It actually, I talked to, I didn't take part in that year in the preparation at all. I talked to the artists and the others, and they said it took them a week to prepare the whole thing. Precisely because it was people who already knew what was going on. There were several artists there who could help with the whole presentation. So even though there was a community, and there was obviously some type of community building there, it didn't have the effect that it should have, even though it happened. So my question is, and that's more or less the end, the question really is, how long Velvet Carnival, if the pandemic went on, if the only format that would be possible this year, next year, would be such a small group of insiders working on the theme. How long the Velvet Carnival would survive? I don't know, and I think it actually could get into problems if you lose completely the rest of the iceberg, because that's where the energy is sort of generated. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
It was super interesting, and I would love to talk to you about that later on, and we will all have a chance to do that.
It's the coffee break, right?
No,
No. Oh, it's
we started
So if you want coffee, you can have it.
No, sorry. I think we started later, and we...
You need coffee.
Oh, in that case.
No, it was my mistake. I should have been quiet.
It was my mistake. It was so interesting. I couldn't just stop. But no, please, the floor is yours now, and then we will decide whether we will have a discussion now or we need really the.
I think after we need coffee.
We have a discussion at the end.
Okay.
I apologize if you have to see my email, but
On the Dropbox.
it's the file that you set up, and I have to find the link for the file. So
You can read.
Shall I bring you some coffee?
Okay, it will be one of your emails.
Send you the link.
Please send me the link. Okay, I closed it.
Meanwhile, I can clean the stage.
Oh, here, I have older. Okay. I have several of them. So I sort of go around this. Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully.
And then you want to play the film?
It's inside, I hope.
Oh, okay.
I wrote inside.
Actually, I'll just download it. Make sure. All right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for the organizers to have invited me here. So when we talk about insiders and outsiders, or academicians or artists, I think I'm more from the part of the insiders and more part of the artists than of the people who can talk very seriously about very interesting subjects, and I feel sometimes the subject. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So I'm Vidal, I'm from Brussels. I'm a freelance artist, but I'm quite deeply related with the Zinneke Parade. Zinneke Parade in Brussels. And I was not here yesterday morning. Why? Because I was in Brussels the day before, and I will show you what will I have to do here? Arrows. Okay. And if everything goes fine, now something should start now.
Okay, again? I thought it started.
No. No, it doesn't start. Just to show the movie there.
I'll
separately.
Okay.
loudspeakers in them. And this went on for 2.5 hours. And people following, it was not announced, and it was in the streets of Brussels and going outside in the outskirts of Brussels. Can we go back to the, sorry. So what was this in fact? It was a kind of funeral ceremony for a parade that never happened. So the Zinneke parade is a biannual, I will show you some pictures of the, so you have an image what is the Zinneke parade, by some pictures. So, yeah. Here we are. So these are some pictures. Yeah. Arrow? Yeah. These are the pictures from the Seneca Parade in normal days, from the editions of 2016, 2018, other years. Big structures, a lot of groups, I will go in details a little bit later. This was 2018, where the thematic was illegal, because there is each year another theme. There is a group working on a wall and a breaking of a wall. This was our group, as you remember, you see again these megaphones. We had created a group as a homage in a way to the streets and to the, with mass Pussy Riot style, where we met Olga, by the way. So briefly, what is the Seneca Parade? It was a parade created in 2000 in the framework of the Brussels as a capital city of Europe. And what was the purpose in that day? It was to show all the diversity of Brussels. It was not built on traditions or whatever. It was built on the fact that Brussels is encountering, I don't know, 190 nationalities, and with a lot of different associations, music styles, communities. And the idea of Brussels 2000 was to create a big stage to show all this diversity, but not on itself, but in a kind of creative process, in a participatory process. So it's a biannual parade, each 2 years, of creation and participatory projects and trajectoire. So it's always, they work, let's say, for each parade, they work 1 year on the mixing all the structures to make the parade possible, and then 1 year on really the results. So it's very much linked to your image of the iceberg. The parade is really only the top. It's the big day, of course, and everybody's working towards this. But it's each year, each edition is almost 2 years of preparation and creation and reflection and why and what and how. So it shows the diversity as a new identity of the hybrid city. So we talked a lot here about people going back to their roots, people trying to stick to their identity. Here, Brussels is a complicated city because of all these nationalities. There is not one identity. There is a completed hybrid identity. And one of the tasks, in a way, of Seneca Parade is to reinvent identity, or at least a moment where all these cultures, they have their own ceremonies and their own traditions. But in this moment of the Seneca, all these traditions can be wiped away to create a new one, in a way, a new identity, anyway. And the other thing that is very important in the baselines of the Seneca Parade is this idea to reclaim the streets. Not only, okay, the streets are 363 days a year, they are for consummation in a way, to go from one point to another, but 1 day at least a year is a place for creation, for poetry, for freedom, for reflection, for debate, for togetherness, and for this kind of new identity. And because it is in Brussels, there is, of course, this kind of twisted element of, it's not satire, but there is a kind of carnivalesque idea behind it, to reinvent, to look at the other way to the society and to the city. So the fact that it's happening in the city and in the public place is very important, of course. More or less 2,000 participants, around 20 synods. The synods are the subgroups, and each time there are 100 people, could be 150 smaller, but around 150 people for one subgroup, called the synod. Public, a lot. Each year 20,000, some people say 60,000, I don't know. I heard all kinds of numbers, nobody never managed to count them. And it's a parade, so it goes around in the city. We tried all kinds of different ways to cross the city. The synods were crossing, then the synods were crossing the city from A to B, and then there was some editions where we did a big loop in the city center, where there were entrances, and all the synods, they came in the center and they started a big carousel of subgroups, doing, in a way, moving shows. It's much more than just marching bands, it's really moving shows, it's creation. So there's artists working with all kinds of groups, and they create new material, new music, new costumes, new makeup, new wagons, if you want. And each year, each 2 years in fact, there is a kind of theme voted by the audience. I summed up some examples. Disorder was one, water was another one, illegal was one, Olu was the one that didn't happen. Olu to the wolves, yes? And that's why, in fact, and then I go back to what we did 2 days ago, it was the funeral of the wolf, in fact, because in 2020 we should have done the parade about the wolves. It was cancelled. The pandemic was 2 months before, so Zinneke didn't have time to reinvent anything, but they decided not to postpone it 1 year, just to cut it, to stop it, and to see what we would do in 2022. And so the parade of the wolves never happened. They tried, wait, I'll go on a little bit. What is it? I will go a little bit back in times. So this is back in times. 17 November, you just mentioned, Martin, 17 November 2020. I go back to 17 November 2019, and this again is us. So what was the idea? For the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the Zinneke Parade, we have planned a kind of international collaboration and to create a kind of international synod who would break in the Zinneke Parade. And it was built out of people from Prague, people from Rotterdam, from the Godard School and the ICA Festival, International Community Art Festival, and people from Oi Musica, from Edinburgh, all people who are busy with parades, rituals, reclaiming the streets, with poets, with satire, with musicians, artists. And we wanted to make a big new kind of synod. And we were, me and Jo, my colleague who is not here, the musician that you saw there, we were kind of pushing this synod. And the idea was to do on each location a mini parade and then to bring all these people back to Brussels. And this we did. We started here, and this was the result during the Velvet Parade in 2019. Fantastic experience.
It's amazing.
The day before we wanted to leave to Rotterdam to go to start to work with Rotterdam, they locked everything down. They put stones on the borders, and we couldn't go to Rotterdam anymore. So Zinneke decides to cancel their parade. What is here? And this was the only thing that was left from a parade 2020. It's some posters hanging in an empty street. They were thinking it was quite quick because the lockdown was, when was the lockdown? I wrote it here somewhere. Somewhere end of March, and normally it was the 10th of May. So we had, let's say, 6 weeks to reinvent something, but based on already a long time of production, so it was impossible with all these participants to reinvent something new. This was impossible on 6 weeks' time. They tried the different things, and in the end they decided to cancel it and to replace it by a radio program of 2 hours that was broadcasted in this limited time of the 2 hours of the parade. A radio broadcast and some weird images of a kind of phantom presence in the city, because more was not possible. They decided 2 or 3 other things that were very important, not for the audience, but for us, the artists. They decided to pay all the artists who were working. Because we didn't talk about all this, but of course all the people involved in this, during the lockdown, there was a lot of artists involved in this anyway, is that they didn't have income anymore. A lot didn't have income anymore. So Zinneke Parade is a subvention organization, and they decided whatever happened, we pay the artists until the end. And they also created all kinds of opportunities for each subgroup to anyway to try to do something with what they had already prepared. But in a small way, in a video, in a mini parade, in the street, in their neighborhood, whatever. All this was possible, and they would support this. But they decided to cancel the Parade 22. What they wanted to do in September is a kind of more guerrilla-style parade, not announced, just with all kinds of music groups, friends, we just go in the streets. The police was aware, we had the agreement, but it was not announced to the audience. And the idea was just in this empty street to go on and to play, and the people would open their windows. We were already, and 3 hours before, the mayor decided no. Because of political opponents pushing it. Because it was just before the second lockdown. We felt it was tricky. Or even the artists and the participants said, is it a good idea to do it with masks? They had put up a total COVID-proof plan. But somebody, a policeman, heard that the Zinneke would appear in the city. And for a lot of politicians or even police who were not informed, Zinneke means 20,000 people on the street, and he texts to our mayor saying, what are you doing? You are 3 days before the second lockdown, you are allowing a Zinneke parade to go. And he couldn't defend himself, and the opposition was there ready to eat him. So the only thing he could do is to decide 2 hours before we were dressed up, and he canceled it without any excuse until today. Neither excuse, neither explanation. That's it. So this is the reality of COVID. Everybody was eating sandwich, crying, and going home. So the need of a funeral of this parade who never existed that we did 2 days ago was quite necessary as a kind of a cathartic moment, and this we closed down, and it was at the same time the birth of the new workshops and new reflection about a new parade in 2022. Voilà. I want to conclude with some little things. What, for me, as an artist, as a person who is working for Zinneke, but I am not Zinneke, I work for a lot of different organizations who are quite involved in artists, in public space, in how you deal with this. What did it brought to me as a human, as an artist, as a citizen, and what kind of awareness I have now? First of all, we talked about it yesterday, the virtual continuity of everything that couldn't happen in real life. I don't believe in this. Very simple. I think it's good as a support, it's good as probably as a transition, or it's good because we could, like that, pay a lot of artists to do work because they were streaming. But if you do a little bit inquiry, who is looking to a jazz orchestra or a traditional orchestra for 2 hours sitting on his ass while he was already 7 hours in front of a Zoom? I'm sorry, this doesn't work. It's good to pay artists and to create opportunities, but on the long term, it's dead. So that is one thing. And I say that, it's not my belief, I say that because I experienced it. The moment that we could do, again, things on the streets, we went with small groups, with big groups, the emotion you got back from people that finally, after sitting inside, locked down, alone, and suddenly the fact that you could, on the streets, use them and have a party or have a reflection or just fun, it was so strong, all these emotions, that you felt this is what it's about, in fact. And another theme that was often talked about during this, especially the second lockdown, was what is essential. So two things are clear anyway. I think the politics they choose for is the economy the stupid. That is the baseline, I think, in a lot of countries, in a lot of attitudes. So we close everything down so that the economy can continue and that we are safe on this level. Because, or imagine there will be a lot of debt and the economy will die and the society will die. So for them, the essential is, of course, the economy. Stupid. Okay, thank you very much. I got the message. And everybody stays at home. Okay? You go to school, you go to work, you go to Zoom, but that's it. That's your life now. And you go to Zoom. That's your life. That's the essential. Like that you will survive probably. I don't know. For 1 year you can survive like that. The second year you will start to have problems. And the third year I think you will die as a human. So this is not the essential, stupid. But then there was the famous debate on what is the essential. In France and then in Belgium they decided to open the bookshops. Because it is important to read books. Yes, it's very important to read books. In Belgium, they decided to open also the museums, because it's important to go to the museums. Right, thank you very much. But what is perhaps the most important of all is the people coming together, celebrating together in what the Catalans called yesterday, for the people, by the people. This whole idea of community, of coming together with a lot of people. I think this is really the essential. If you don't have this anymore, and that is, you find this in all the examples you gave, ceremonies, rituals, it's this coming together, this physical contact between the performer and the participant and the audience, but the audience becomes also participant. All this kind of interaction, I think is really the base of everything. If you get this away, then there is nothing existing anymore. So, I asked the same question to Zinke. So what is Zinke for you in 2022? How does it look? You have to know that Zinke was already years, they are rethinking all the time. Should it be a parade? Perhaps it should not be a parade next time. And now the thing that they really want is, let's have a parade like we always had them, that it looked like that, and it was a parade of 2018, I think, with so many people. But again, the image of the iceberg is there. That this you can manage, you can have a lot of groups and a big party on the streets. But all this work under the level will be managed from now on until May 14th of May 2022. Will we manage to do all this preparation like we should do them? That is still the big question. We're talking today, the parade is in 6 months. We don't know. We really don't know. And we don't know also if things will go worse or better, or if we have to ask everybody if they have their pass or not. There is a lot of question marks, but for the moment, let's say, the dream is to go back to this basic, essential being together in a kind of new, festive version of a diverse city with all their differences, all these scholars, all these projects, all these artists. And of course, like we said yesterday, the need to have a fool everywhere. Because that is the only glasses we should wear, is the glasses of the fool. Not only one day a year, not only on Carnival, a little bit more than that. I think it would make us feel better, and the fool multiplied by 10,000. Thank you.
Thank you all. We've heard super interesting, I said it so many times, but it was really very interesting. It makes me think of very many things that I would like to discuss with you, but as we agreed, it might be a good time for coffee now.
Yes,
And to move the discussion afterwards.
exactly.
And how much time?
We have half an hour for coffee.
Half an hour?
Yes, we are good in time because we moved into 10:30. So I will just move the line. Oh,
No, we have time until 1.
that's fine.
And we have 2 presentations.
It's 12:20, which is,
Well,
I would suggest 15.
so, no, but we're okay, because if we begin 12:20, then we have 40 minutes for the remaining 2 presentations, 40 minutes, and then it's 1 o'clock, and it's
And we don't discuss anything.
don't we?
Oh, yes,
We move it for 20 minutes because we have one less presentation in the afternoon, so it's fine.
okay, so what do you do?
Now let's make
Now let's go
25
for
minutes.
Yeah, 25 minutes for it.
5 minutes.
Okay, now 25 minutes for
12:15.
12:15 back. Right.
Quarter after 12.
Yeah.
I don't know what we are, but I would like to say thank you, Anna. Maybe we can just try to say hello to Krakow.
Yes.
It's strange because there is no reaction. We can see her or she can really see us, I'm not sure. But we just try to say goodbye and thank you for your presentation.
So the next presentation is also a pre-recorded one. A pre-recorded one.
No, next is Mark.
Ah, why was it him?
I'm actually here.
Okay, then the situation is the same. Okay, so the next event is Mark Ruben, and please apologies for my mispronunciation, from Oslo University. Please.
Did you see it here? Did you upload?
Je to v tom foldu. Když to vprava filmuje, je to tam vidět.
Oh, this one. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to take you out of Europe and even out of Nevada to Japan. And we are leaving the carnival Western atmosphere behind us and we're going to a completely different place, to the Gion Festival. And my focus in my presentation is going to be on the fight for what I've called authenticity, or what the Japanese they call it hongi, which means the true meaning, the real meaning behind the festival, and how that can be kept, how that can be sort of preserved, even though nothing of the authentic stuff can be taken out of storage, nothing of the authentic, real, sort of historical, traditional performances are possible. How can we make something that's still authentic? And how can we actually agree on what is authentic? Because this is not a centrally organized event. So here we are at the shrine where the gods are. And here we see three people from one of the float streets praying at the shrine, and a priest waiting at the back. They're all covered up, and it also looks very desolate, and that's exactly what it felt like. So, what is Kyoto's Gion Festival? So it's thank you. It's one of the largest and best archived and best, most prestigious festivals in Japan. They just in 2019 they celebrated this birthday, 1,150 years, which is probably off by 100 years, but still respectable, I would say. And the idea about the festival, as all city festivals, is to dispel illness, because this is in middle of summer, after the monsoon ends. The city is flooded, all the germs come into the water, everybody gets sick, so this is a typical summer festival. Yeah, it attracts enormous crowds, as you can see, about 1 million people on the busiest days. And there's some other days when there's maybe just 800,000, but like Kyoto is like completely overrun by this festival for a whole month. You see the shrine up there, and then you see the milling around of people that happens on the busiest day. It was also the first festival to actually become heritage, first domestically and then UNESCO more recently. I'll talk a bit about that as well. So just to give you an idea about what's going on, so it's structured around 2 dates, and the idea is that the gods, they are actually here, in this shrine over here, Yasaka Shrine, which used to be a Buddhist temple, and the gods are moved over here, across the river, into the city, and then here, these are all the float streets. So you have 2 events, basically. One is moving the gods here,
and then moving them back again a week later. And then the parades, they happen before they call it the mikoshi, which is the thing they carry the gods in, right? Number one Japanese word today, mikoshi, because I don't know what else to call it. So, yeah, so that is how it's structured. This is what the mikoshi looks like. So it's 3 of them, 3 gods, and you have these mikoshi groups that carry them, and they are very macho. There's a lot of shouting. There used to be a lot of drinking and fighting too, but now UNESCO stopped all of that. It's it's very lively and very sort of just say working class kind of atmosphere, mafia type of atmosphere actually. And this is the parade. One of the 2 parades, and you can see these are huge floats, tens of meters high, and these are run by streets, or float streets. So part of the streets on the first parade, and the other part on the second parade. So the festival is very non-centered, so there are lots of groups involved. So here you can see a few of them. That are important today because they were active in 2020. So this is one of the mikoshi groups, and so you can see they are sort of workers, right? And here you have the parishioners that are close to the shrine, and they are very sort of uptight, and they are the business owners from the district, and they collect money, and they are closely connected to the they are the bosses, right? Kyoto is a very satisfied society, and here you have the streets. One of the 34 streets, which also have groups, and every street is different. So those groups they are administratively divided into 2 groups, two sections: religious ones and cultural ones. And this is very important in how this whole heritage thing changed the festival. So the religious ones, and here it says secular setting, I think. Secular constitution. Under the secular constitution, religious activities cannot be supported by the state, they cannot get any subsidies. But the cultural ones can. And so the floats are defined as cultural, and the other ones are defined as religious, so they cannot get any subsidies. And of course, that means that the religious ones, which is the parishioners groups and the mikoshi groups, they take the higher ground, and they say that the streets are sort of commercial, and they are living off the subsidies, and that's not the real thing. And of course, the float groups, they say that these people are stuck up. Yeah. And they are both right, of course. And the media, they are having to navigate between this. They often stress the cultural part, because they don't want to touch on the religious part. But all this was different in 2020. Okay, so in 2020, this so-called state of emergency reached Kyoto in April, and then very soon afterwards there was a press conference at the shrine where the priest said, sorry, well, he's saying the festival has 2 parts. One is the festival for the gods, and the other one is the festival for the people. The festival for the people is cancelled. The festival for the gods will be performed with even more strenuously than ever before. So we're not cancelling. We're just cancelling the bit for the people, because people can't get it. And then, so, very sad, but then in May, things looked up a little bit, and the state of emergency got lifted, and then things started happening. And in the end, so what really happened is that there was no mikoshi, but the gods were moved into town in a different way. There was no parade, but all the streets did something else. So that was very special because this didn't happen anywhere else in Japan. Everything was cancelled. So this was also a big thing in the media. The NHK, the national television, were all over this, and they were there for the planning from the start, filming everything, how it was done and putting their own angle on it. Here you can see the press conference. This is the priest, and this is the head of the Floats Association, all nicely covered up. And yeah, the shrine put on their own little event, which was an event of praying for only for the gods, so to say, but going back to the original thing, the same thing that they revived for the Spanish flu, and that they did that again at this Buddhist temple where there's a dragon pond, and the shrine is saying we have this pre-modern technology for cleansing the air and the water in the city, and this is what we're going to do. This was the shrine's angle, but it was not advertised. The mayor came, it was in the newspaper, but yeah, it didn't reach the people. And this is the alternative Mikoshi. So what they did is instead they put the gods onto a horse, and they led the horse it's called the travel site in town, and then back again. This is the way back. You can see it, monsoon wouldn't end. It was raining the whole time. And this is the alternative parade. So if you just compare this with this, you can see it's not quite the same thing. But at least, you know, they did it. Yeah. And so this idea with the horse was conceived by one of these parishioners. So the parishioners meeting decided on this, and on the meeting that they decided it was filmed by the NHK. And this became the core of lots of documentaries and so on that were shown on television afterwards. Yeah, but of course, the parishioners did decide this, and then the other two groups, like the Mikoshi people and the float people, they are, what's going on? What about us? And they were not necessarily happy about it. So the float people, they ended up doing this instead. So they think, okay, they are using branches to move the gods. We will use branches instead of our floats. And just go to the place where the gods are and pray and then go back home again. That's all it was. But this was the result of a lot of very intense fighting. So you had there's so many streets, right? So many floats, they're all independent. And the young people, they were saying, no, we need to set up the floats. If you have any faith in this festival, then you know you will not be infected. This is a festival against epidemics, right? And even if we get the disease, this is a worthy cause. I am willing to die for this. These were the hot hats. And then you had the older people, they sort of going to go, oh, stop. And if anybody gets infected doing this, the festival is finished, right? Festival against epidemics and people falling ill left, right? Yeah. So we certainly not. And this fight was going on. The young hot hats tried to involve the shrine, saying, listen, these old people, they're just thinking about, they don't want to get ill. We are fighting to get this festival against illness going. And the shrine says, well, you know, we are the religious bit and you are the cultural bit, and you have subsidies and you don't want to get involved. Actually, you know, health warnings, this is modern times. So they were, yeah. And these young people, they were writing about their frustration in blogs and so on. So here we have this is the parishioners, the elite, you can say. And so they decided that for them, the important thing was to get the gods to town in whatever way possible. So people used the horse. The shrine thought that was a good idea, because people hated the idea, of course. And then they said, well, the shrine did this event based on ancient times, but we are, for the parishioners, the main thing is to bring the gods to the parishioners too. So they devised this thing, this little box on wheels, and they wheeled the gods, which is again these things there. They symbolize the gods. They wheeled them around all the all the 33 neighborhoods that are part of the parish. And that's a long walk, and the priest also went along. It was raining the whole time. And they also visited the Mikoshi people. So here you see one of the, this is actually one of the head of the parishioners organization, sprinkling water from the dragon well at the shrine over the Mikoshi people to say, you know, we didn't forget you. Yeah. Maybe I'll do this one first because it's more important, and I'll do the other one if I have time. So, and here you can see the Mikoshi people looking at the horse arriving. You can see they're not happy, right? and because what is, so they were wondering, so, you know, so we are wearing white clothing, and the white clothing it signifies death. If you are carrying the Mikoshi, you are basically already a walking dead body. You do this with putting your life on the line. And you can see that they take it seriously on the picture over here, right? Yeah, this thing weighs 4 tons or whatever, and they're throwing it up in the air, and they've got huge bumps. So, and they really put their pride into this, and now we've got this dead horse, basically. Yeah, okay, it's white, but yeah, it's not. And then after that, they put the gods on the cart, and they walk the cart through the neighborhood, you know? I mean, what's going on, right? So this is completely not wrong. They were also not invited to any of the things because they didn't need to like them, right? They are like the mafia. So they are looking there, what have these parishioners, these shopkeepers, what have they come up with, you know? And what is this, this city horse? And when the horse comes, they start doing their yells. They've got the yells like yoy, yoy, and so on. And the people with the horse, they're trying not to look at them, you know. So it's like that. A lot of tension in there. They're very angry because they were not allowed into the shrine. But, yeah. So. Yeah, so here you see different notions of what is the authentic essence of the festival. And one of the shrine is all about the correct procedure for this pre-modern technique to cleanse the water. Then you have the parishioners that we need to move the gods to the people so they can pray. And then you have the floats, yeah, same kind of thing. But the Mikoshi groups, they are all about, no, it's about the heart. It's about this willingness to die. Some of the float people were like that too, right? But most of them were not. And it's about, you know, the physical exertion of carrying this 4-ton thing around the city and back again. It takes hours and hours. So it's not about the myths and the procedures, but it's about the heart. And then you have the media narrative, and I probably can't talk about it, but the media all frame this as this is the festival dropped all the tourism bit, and now the real essence, which is the faith of the people, shines forth in a way that makes it even more authentic than it has ever been. So this is actually the most authentic Lyon festival ever, right? Although everything was newly invented. And that media narrative really struck home and it caught on. Yeah, I'll have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Mark, it was an example from a completely different world that brought a completely changed perspective, and it was very, very interesting to look at this and listen to you. How much time? Maybe.
Actually, we go for a lunch now, and we will have the discussion after the second part of the morning session. So if you don't mind, meet 5 or 10 minutes downstairs on the street, and I will bring you to the restaurant. Those who eat meat can be happy because we have a roasted duck, which is a typical Czech, and the others are vegetarians, I'm sorry. Right. So thank you for all the presentations, and just we meet in 5 minutes downstairs and go for our
And
lunch.
let's hope that, filled with food, we'll have more energy for discussion, which
Yes.
is still
Yeah.
escaping somehow, but we will come back to it.
Yeah, we will. We all always do discussion at the end. So for those who go, oh no, oh, I'm sorry, I'm idiot. We should have the discussion now. Exactly. I'm sorry. Right. Exactly. This is the end of the morning session. I was
Yes.
somehow.
I'm complying to the
Thank you. Exactly. So I'm sorry. The roasted egg will wait a little. So I would say let's make maybe 15 minutes discussion. So we have it because still we have the things in mind. Just put the duck a little bit away of your mind if you can for the next 15 minutes, and let's go back for the topics of the morning. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's better.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much to all the presenters. What we've seen today were different symbolic projects of collective belonging or subscribing to different or certain ideas. And it made me think of this old idea of mirrors and models. And I was thinking by looking at Viola's and Martin's presentations, because their presentations were examples demonstrating how different symbols can be employed to express similar ideas or similarly sacred ideas of nationhood or statehood. And the common question that came to my mind is this: what kind of reflection should be triggered by a ritual that refers to different kinds of belonging, collective belonging? Now, whether it's national, municipal, or anything else, now I'm thinking of those who work on that reflection, that is the dramatologist, as I think, I can't remember who, but I think you used that word.
Yes, I did.
And who is that person? And the function, the role of that person, and the responsibility that this person has, right? Now, Rita showed us the perspective of the performers, of the artists, right? And you showed us how different tensions are employed, between different actors. They are subjected to different pressures, and that's the great power that you have to manage those tensions, and the power that artists or performers have by holding, the power that you have by influencing our collective minds and collective mind, and people who are participating in the ritual. And the question is now, which part of that was interfered by COVID, right? Whether the symbolic part, or the intention, the dramaturgical part, or the technical part, or the artistic expression. So, it was a very inspiring session. Thank you. Any questions?
Just
Just
a remark. The artistic, I didn't mention that. I forgot that. But the artistic part wasn't. When I talked to the artists who created the theme, they actually said that they enjoyed it much more because they didn't have to do the heavy lifting that is connected with working with other people who don't know what to do, right? So they said we were a group, we knew what to do, we did it in a week, and we sort of enjoyed it, and it was excellent because everyone... We weren't exhausted, because exhaustion is something that the organizers often feel after several weeks of preparations. So the artistic part of that wasn't affected in the sense that the people who were responsible for the artistic part were relaxed. The dramaturgist, well, they didn't do anything, so in that sense they weren't also stressed, but it didn't happen, right? The dynamic.
I'm thinking of something on a high level, right? The unconscious influence that you have, because what Viola says, the collective belonging is a sacred thing. You go to the past; it's a really big idea. With you talk about the Czech people are talking about really serious events, but they are sort of mocking it or bringing another kind of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's unconscious, but somebody is working on, working on the kind of reflection that is supposed to be triggered in the audience, right?
Right.
I mean, exactly the juxtaposition of those two examples shows us, how different collectivities subscribing to certain ideas employ different kinds of emotions. This is what I wanted to say.
I see.
Right? So, yeah, maybe on a technical level it's easy, but in general it speaks of something much larger, right?
But I would like to say something about it. The function of an artist, I think, in this kind of events, in this kind of ceremonies, or whatever you want to call them, he is not existing if the audience is not existing, if the participant is not existing. It's not just the artist who, it's really an interaction between, it's a triangular between the participant and the audience, the artist, and especially in this kind of public events where a lot of people are involved, the artist has a little bit the function of the shaman, I think. And that means that it cannot exist without the real response, the physical response, or the physical exchange with the participants. So I agree with you that is, for one, it's a little bit more easy because you don't have to carry all this interaction between participants who don't know what is music, they have to learn to dance, to make masks, it's all kind of skills. But that is just the structure, is just how you build it. But the event itself, why we do this, it has no reason to exist, so the artist is dead if there is not this interaction, not this involvement with these communities in this kind of situation of parades and carnivals and new neo-rituals. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's very important for what are public events for?
Yeah, and that is what I want to just add one more thing, and suddenly it became more clear for me, at least, I think for people like Sinneke and all these people, that we also need all this. Without this, we don't exist. It's not we can do our thing in our corner and leave the participant away. No, we are part of the society, of this community. We are just perhaps the most crazy in front, or the shaman, or the jester, but we are pulling things, we are creating things. We have a responsibility, but we are not existing if there is not this interaction with the participants and with the audience that is also reacting on a very immediate way on what we are doing and what we are presenting. And that is the base of the shaman, or the priest, or the fool in this kind of parades.
So a very responsible role. Sarah, you had the...
I guess I want to go back to the ice organs, kind of related to this discussion, and thinking about Marcus' point, and really trying to apply it to the other examples of it as well, of what's all of the behind-the-scenes work that's going on. And I think your presentation really brought the conflicts and tensions out more, whereas Martin talked more about the cooperative community experience being the heart of the event in some ways, as important as what you're talking about between the audience. So I guess I'm just curious to look at this a bit more when we're talking about what's essential. I mean, is it really trying to understand these crucial issues that come up behind the scenes, right? And the feeling of community as the artists are working, it's hard work, right? It's hard work working with the school children and the others. And then in yours, well, this wouldn't be so much with the shamanic, but maybe in a sense, I mean, these other spaces, the inside spaces, not in the streets, like, what's going on there? I mean, it seems to me that a lot of the essential issues, the conflict between the maybe class isn't right, but different classes, or between the kids and the artists, I mean, all of those seem to be clearer in these sort of behind the scenes contexts. I don't know.
Yeah, I think ownership is like a really important word. So all these groups, they put all this. I mean, they never go on summer holiday in their life.
Yeah.
Because this is their summer holiday. Yeah. And they spend all the money on this, and that's thousands of people.
Yeah.
So, and if you live in a street that has a float, and you go on summer holiday, then basically you're fined. You have to pay fine. So and you also are exiled. Yeah, so you can't do it, right? But this ownership is so strong, and it's such a big motivator that you have to be very careful if you want to, if it appears like somebody else is taking over, or when the balance between groups that all do their own things under one umbrella, whether that balance changes. And so I imagine that if it's like that this rolls on basically on all old procedures. But if you have like a new festival where you have an artistic creator, for example, I wonder how you create this ownership. People feel like, yeah, we're just extras in the show that somebody else created, but you have to get it from there too. Like this is Brussels, this is us, the people for the people. That must be a very difficult balance to strike, I would imagine.
And it's going on for months and months. That's the part, again, the iceberg. It's like your example. It's like, and you were like all year long, and probably with yours also. It's all of those days and months spent working together, dealing with conflicts. And we tend to not see that as the essential part of it.
Yeah, while running a big financial risk doing it.
I have a bit of a commentary, a bit of a general question about, like, I'm looking at some of our work and the common points I have in my work, and like pre-pandemic, we already had this sort of conflict between certain kinds of religious rights of religious practice, and social welfare, or security. Now with the pandemic, it's about public health. Like, for example, before we talked about this in another conversation today, before there was an issue of masking, where public spaces in Europe and Western countries at least were asking people not to mask because of security, public security. And there were people who found this uncomfortable or wrong, like, you should have the right maybe to mask yourself. And then we had religious exceptions to this. Certain religious practitioners have the religious right to cover their face. And now with the pandemic, this is inversed. We have the request of keeping masks for health. And we have examples of religious practitioners that feel it goes against their religious practice, or the ban on gatherings and meetings, and people circumventing these bans because they feel that for their religious practice, they have the right, this is how they need to practice. And then I'm starting to think, like, should we, because we've talked about this aspect of public ritual and its connection to welfare, feeling, staying well, in socially connected, and all these positive aspects of public ritual, be it religious or not. I mean, we should really recognize better that not only the religious justifications should stand in the discussion within this conflict of religious or other kind of cultural needs connected to not only your identity or expression, but your well-being. And then on the other side, the public needs that we might have in times of pandemic, the restrictions that we're putting on things. And remember that not only religious forms, we know as religious scientists know that the church religion is going down, the non-institutional forms of religion are growing. So soon we really need to start to recognize also the non-institutional practitioners' rights and position, also in terms of these kinds of, the social well-being, medical well-being, and the whole discussion.
Thank you. I just want one question for Mark. You showed us the inner conflicts that became now visible and bodily. What do you think will happen? What is your hypothesis for the next year? If it will be somehow allowed already?
So that was 2021, right? So it just happened actually in July, and but with the same. So this 2020 became the model for 2021 as well. And they were able to do a little bit more, but still no crowds and so on. Yeah, but they're hoping to get rid of it, I think. Yeah, they actually already last year they said we will never do this again, whatever happens, and then they end up doing it again. But what strikes me is that there was no attempt to do anything online, for example. Well, this is a very online society.
There was no attempt to do anything like that. It's like it was not recognized as a possible form of ritual at all. Yeah. But of course, people are worried. They're worried about funding disappearing, people putting their money in other things, and they're worried about the social networks unraveling. Like the kids learning to play the music, now they're all playing football, that kind of thing. Yeah, so 2022 I think will be a big test.
I think the issue of transmission of rituals is an important one as well. Like, there's a generation of kids that's not going to get those things.
No, and 2 years is a lot of time for kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they didn't join the orchestra when they were 6, and now they're 8, and they're into other things. And so how are we going to deal with that? And it's like 36 orchestras you have to have. So
You have to have.
you have quite a few of them, yeah.
No, that's it. In a way, we are in the middle of it still. Even if we think it's past, it's maybe we are in the middle. And I think it could go back to normal if we all want or not, I don't know. But imagine in 1 year there is another thing happening. What some people say, another. And then I think. No, but that is what some scientists say, that another.
Scientists do. No.
But if it will happen, then we have a serious problem.
Yeah.
Now I think we can survive it and we can be reinvented. Because it means that there is a structural issue that will really harm a lot of things. And, but
I just wanted to ask Mark, because that's what also you talked about. So do they consider that it's not a festival, it's a ritual, that it actually happened or not? So you have all these conflicts.
Yeah.
And you said they did it again. What did they do?
Yeah.
Like how?
What they did this time.
Well, how did they themselves reflect on what they did?
On what they did, yeah.
Satisfied with the Lord.
Yeah. So there was two main things that people were violently sort of disagreed on, right? And one was the horse, and the Mikoshi bearers being completely excluded. So they tried to fix this by including the Mikoshi bearers more, but there's still no Mikoshi. So they're walking behind the horse, doing their yells. But at least they're in the procession, you know. So it's a little bit better. But of course, that this is only like the central core of the Mikoshi groups that are participating, and all this, like every Mikoshi group has 150 carriers because they change all the time. I mean, this thing is immensely heavy. So hundreds of people are actually excluded, and for them nothing happened. But for the core, it did. It's a lot better now. And then for the floats, at least they were allowed to set up the floats in the street. They were not allowed to do the parade, but they set them up. And people were discouraged from going and seeing them, so, because no crowds. But at least, you know, that allowed the street organization, the people involved in that, to come together and to because for them in 2020 nothing happens, and now at least something happened. So yeah, they tried to make it a little bit better, and they probably succeeded, but it's still very much short from, you know, it's still nothing like it's supposed to be. So yeah.
Okay, I think we can continue on the lunch now. So it was very, very stimulating. Thank you for this. And Olga, am I right? Is that there's good moment to
Perfect. So I would say just we take our things and we go together downstairs and we continue to the restaurant, if you don't mind. Okay? And we will continue 3:15. That's right, 3:15 we continue, right?
Yeah. It's open access. Okay. Yeah.